Hello, everyone, and welcome to the TIG community call for August the 25th, 2024. I'm Sparta, and I'm happy to be with you again. There was a technical issue with the first few minutes of the call, so I'll be providing a brief overview before we transition over to John's updates. During our last community call, we spent the majority of the time reviewing the fundamentals of algorithms, including their history, use cases, and impact on our daily lives. Today, we'll dive in a bit further by taking a closer look at what kinds of breakthroughs TIG could hypothetically enable, as well as discussing how algorithms are valued both inside and outside of the protocol. Without further ado, here's John discussing the latest protocol updates.
Of updates that have already been announced. Just to reiterate, there was support for CUDA, which is a language for programming GPU optimized algorithms, recently introduced. Sort of introduced in tandem with the vector search challenge, which was our newest challenge. And a vector search is one of those types of challenges which is particularly well suited for GPUs. There's also another challenge going to be introduced very soon. I can say we've trialed this one before, which is hypergraph partitioning, which you'll be able to get a sort of, I won't try and explain it verbally, but you'll be able to get a kind of a preview of that sort of well in advance of when it actually goes live, and we'll be accepting innovator contributions. Yeah, in terms of coming updates, there was this sort of issue has cropped up recently. A couple of people have asked me about it. There's some kind of edge case which can occur in TIG, which may in fact have occurred to some of you, which is quite obvious when you think about it. So if someone, a clever innovator, submitted a sort of big leap forward, a much improved algorithm, as you would expect, they would see wide adoption for at least among all rational benchmarkers and be receiving their considerable innovator rewards. But it's possible that a kind of a large contribution, a sort of leap forward in a new type of algorithm, could then be sort of deposed, maybe even the next week by somebody who just nudged it ahead a little bit. Maybe guy makes an algorithm sort of 3 times as fast, but then another guy kind of makes it sort of 1% better the next week, and in that case, the benchmarkers will be rational to adopt the second guy's algorithm, even though it's only slightly faster, and it would seem somewhat unfair under those circumstances that the sort of the kind of innovator of the great breakthrough only enjoyed sort of 1 week's innovator rewards. So this is something that we anticipated and thought about for a while. We have a mechanism to sort of deal with this and make it more fair, which I'll describe to you. So the basic strategy that we have is that there are in fact 2 separate streams of innovator rewards, or there will be. So one is so-called innovative rewards for code optimizations, which are really just improvements to the implementation of an algorithm. Maybe you've sort of optimized a loop, or you've kind of nudged it forward a bit by writing the code just in a cleverer way, which exploits some computer architecture. But the second type of rewards will be for so-called algorithmic breakthroughs, and this is when the sort of the underlying mathematical strategy has been improved. So rather than being a sort of artifact of how it's implemented in computer code, these are for sort of more fundamental mathematical better strategies embodied in computer code. And these things tend to be, they come along less frequently, but they can be incredibly powerful in practice. And anybody who's watched my presentation that I gave at Cambridge University a couple of months ago, I sort of go into it in a bit more detail there, the one that's on YouTube. But the essence of it is that there'll be these 2 streams of innovative rewards available, and someone who has a sort of new algorithm and embodies it in code and submits it to the innovation game. What will happen is, if they believe that their algorithm that they submit doesn't embody an algorithmic breakthrough, and what will happen is that they'll have to pay a small deposit. This is just an anti-Sybil mechanism. And then a certain question will be put out to token holder vote, and the question will be quite simply: is the algorithm embodied in this contribution by the innovator novel? Is it a new type of algorithm? So to be clear here, they're not voting on whether it's a better type of algorithm, whether it's worse, whether it's an improvement on the existing one. That itself will all be sort of market determined in the more traditional way by the benchmarkers. What the vote will be on is simply on novelty. Sort of, is it a new strategy? So what would happen when this sort of vote was triggered because somebody wanted to apply for algorithmic breakthrough rewards? Is that the innovator would be highly incentivized to sort of disclose an explanation of why it is that they think that their algorithm that they've just contributed is novel. There'll be a sort of period of time where people can sort of deliberate on this and maybe say kind of make arguments for and against. One individual, just to sort of highlight it, would be, I suppose, particularly incentivized to highlight the fact that it's not novel if there was a kind of some prior art or some kind of existing idea on which it was based, would be the current recipient of the algorithmic breakthrough reward. So there's this sort of natural tension there. If somebody wants to receive this extra tier of rewards, the existing person who's receiving them would maybe want to kind of challenge their claim, because then they would stop receiving them and they go to the new guy. So one thing to highlight about this is that token holders have the strongest incentive for this vote to go the right way. If you imagine if they vote that it's not an algorithmic breakthrough when it is, then they're sort of foregoing some valuable IP for the innovation game potentially, which is ultimately what gives the TIG token its value. And if they vote that it is an algorithmic breakthrough when it's not, then there's a kind of danger that the current recipient of the algorithmic breakthrough awards will stop receiving them and they'll unfairly be diverted to somebody else. And I suppose that means that current recipient is less likely to put in their great innovation when next they find it. But it's really in everybody's interest that this decision is made correctly. It maximizes the token value. And the vote, at least eventually, will be such that people who don't feel qualified to make a judgment on this subject can delegate their voting power to people who they do deem to be qualified. But the real sort of plus point of this whole process is that it's the only real way to create a strong incentive for the person claiming algorithmic breakthrough awards to disclose a sort of a written explanation of why their algorithm is novel. And that's exactly what the TIG Foundation would require in order to file a patent, secure a patent, because the sort of novelty is a really key aspect of a patent application. So that's really the reason why we do it. And that means that this situation where somebody can come up with a sort of great breakthrough and then just get sort of nudged along by 1% or some small fraction, and then the breakthrough sort of ceases to receive rewards, be avoided. So somebody who was receiving these kind of algorithmic breakthrough rewards would continue to receive them until there was another algorithmic breakthrough. So if some guy, got them and his algorithm was just sort of nudged along by a few, successive code optimizations, as is quite likely to be the case, he would continue to receive that stream of algorithmic breakthrough rewards all the way through. And algorithmic breakthroughs are really, potentially extremely valuable. And so it is right that this guy will tend to receive rewards for a lot longer because algorithmic breakthroughs are quite a lot more rare than code optimizations. And so in general, they should be, receive a larger reward in expectation. So that's really the way that we deal with it. And just to highlight, the token holder vote is not on whether it's better or worse, whether they receive rewards and how many rewards they receive at all in practice is dependent on them receiving sort of sufficient adoption by the benchmarkers, whether it's an algorithmic breakthrough or not. So I just wanted to highlight that mechanism because the mechanism will probably be introduced quite soon. And the reason is that we do seem to be, it's quite gratifying to see that even sooner than we sort of dared hope, there seem to be novel algorithmic strategies being submitted by some of the kind of very, very talented innovators. And these are the kinds of things that we want to make sure we secure intellectual property rights on, patents, copyright, and so on and so forth. So there'll be a more kind of detailed sort of description of how this works in detail published, and we'll of course post that on the Discord channel. But because this is coming and probably coming slightly sooner than we originally anticipated, I just wanted to highlight that to the community. It's a sort of necessary evolution in how innovative rewards are distributed.
Yeah, John, thank you. And this is something that we're very happy about, having people that are contributing to the protocol, contributing algorithms that are really huge leaps forward when it comes to optimizing for the efficiency of the challenges that we have on offer. Yeah, so it's definitely
Mm.
important that we go about protecting them and encouraging them in the correct way because these are potentially very valuable pieces of intellectual property. John, I wanted to ask really quick when it comes to whether or not a contribution is an algorithmic breakthrough or not, is there any kind of threshold that we would be using, perhaps an improvement in efficiency? Or is it going to be a purely qualitative assessment that's made through the vote of a number of educated and qualified participants?
That's a great question. So it is, even if something it's important to highlight that if we somebody claims that kind of that wanted to claim the high tier of algorithmic breakthrough rewards, and they would sort of their algorithm would be sort of put through to this vote. Even if it did pass as being novel, and in actual fact, it's quite easy to create a novel algorithm, which is worse, in fact. The novelty isn't really anything to sort of, write home to your mum about necessarily. Like anyone can create something new, which is, just a load of rubbish or doesn't work very well. And it's important to realize that the vote is purely on novelty. So it's not on whether it's better or worse or an improvement. So that is simply one step in the process. And let's say, for the sake of argument, that it does indeed qualify as a novel algorithm, but then it does not receive, a kind of the sufficiently wide adoption from the benchmarkers because it isn't significantly better. Then it would not receive any rewards at all. So the whether or not it receives rewards in practice and how many rewards it receives, this is all purely market determined still, determined by use of the proof of work benchmarkers. Novelty aspect of it is very important because it needs to be novel in order to file a patent on it, and we have a sort of natural tension between the guy who's already receiving these algorithmic breakthrough rewards and the next guy. And we really want them sort of challenging one another, saying my algorithm is novel, the other guy might say it's not novel, but it's all really completely beside the point if the algorithm then doesn't go on to receive wide adoption. Then in that case, the person who submitted it and claimed the algorithmic breakthrough rewards would then lose their deposit. So from their point of view, it would be a sort of, wasted. They wouldn't earn any money from it because it wasn't adopted by benchmarkers. Plus, they would lose their deposit. So it would be a sort of, kind of an altogether unsuccessful mission for them, even if they did get voted, their algorithm was voted through as novel. So it's I guess I just really want to emphasize that it's still about a sort of market determined thing. It's just that the novelty question is really pivotal, for technical reasons as to with respect to filing a patent. And the best way to incentive, if you're not required to, well, if there's no incentive to disclose an explanation of novelty, in fact, you would probably be incentivized not to as an innovator because you don't necessarily want people knowing your secret source. Maybe you can bump it along and improve it a bit the next time. You don't, but in this case, they have to. I mean, if they didn't disclose this explanation, it would be quite unlikely that anybody would vote for it, and then it wouldn't be eligible for those enhanced rewards at all. And so this is really the motivation behind the mechanism, which is this incentive to disclose an explanation of novelty. But essentially, it's still all market determined. It's all about the benchmarkers. The novelty thing is just a little gatekeeping, a tick that you have to get through in order to be eligible for those enhanced rewards at all. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. And I'm going to pivot a little bit here. Speaking of algorithmic improvements, since the protocol went live and we started getting benchmarkers and innovators involved, we've had so far four problems. Those problems are the knapsack problem, Boolean satisfiability, vehicle routing, and vector range search. Now,
Mm.
the most exciting part of TIG, at least for me, is when these algorithms are sufficiently refined such that they make their way into the real world. Now, I wanted to ask you,
Mm.
how much have these algorithms been improved since the challenges were initially introduced? And at what point do we say, okay, there's been enough improvements to them, they are much more optimized, we think, than what is available right now on the open market.
Mhm.
We want to take these algorithms and start shopping them around to, let's say, commercial entities. At what point does that
Hmm.
happen, and what does that process look like?
Yeah, it's a great question. So, um, the in terms of the how much they've been optimized, I mean, compared to the initial seed algorithms that were in for the three challenges which TIG launched with, there's been very considerable speed up. In the case of SAT, I think it's several hundred times faster than the sort of initial seed algorithm that was in, which was a sort of a pretty good algorithm. In fact, it wasn't just some kind of brute force, simple-minded thing. Um, as far as we know, however, for the knapsack problem and the vehicle routing problem, we're sort of pushing the state of the art. We have very competitive algorithms for those. For the SAT problem, it is suspected, we're doing a bit more analysis on this a moment, but we might have fastest implementation of the best algorithm that there is out there. So the guy who created it managed to find, what was known to be the fastest one, sort of in the literature. He didn't invent the algorithm, but he created an implementation of it which is faster, more efficient than one that is available anywhere else, as far as we know. So that is a significant achievement. With the vector search one, it's quite interesting. Again, we're looking into it a little bit now because it is quite a new problem. It wasn't released. It looks like somebody's sort of done something novel, potentially algorithmically already, and this is why we're really expediting this second stream of rewards. And that person, in fact, has also contacted us as saying that he's got some even more clever algorithmic stuff, and was querying this thing, like, what it happens if I put it in, but then someone just nudges it along by a smaller round amount, and I won't get my, the rewards that I would feel I would deserve for that, which is absolutely a kind of a valid concern, and what I just told you about is designed to address. So that's really why we're expediting this. If we don't have a second stream of rewards for algorithmic breakthroughs, it wouldn't be rational necessarily for innovators to put in their best stuff with respect to the underlying algorithm, because they might be afraid of just getting sort of pipped and nudged along and not getting the reward they feel they deserve. So what I would say is that, I mean, it is good. I personally didn't dare to hope that we would get a genuine algorithmic innovation sort of this early on. On reflection, it's actually not too surprising because of just the sheer size of the reward which is available for innovators. If you see how many tokens they will earn per week, and what those tokens are currently, seem to be trading for. It's a very large reward compared to most, let's say, kind of academic salaries, and where a lot of this type of research tends to be done. So in it actually, given that the TIG seems to be catching people's imaginations and being quite successful, it isn't really surprising that we're getting some sort of serious innovation so early. And we have all these plans in place to sort of move to accommodate that, but we just need to sort of expedite them. Another point is that historically we've been a little bit resource constrained because we were self-funding from the very beginning. We didn't want to get external investors in because, a lot of you guys probably know, what often happens is that they negotiate a deal where they get a huge number of tokens for like pennies. And then what happens is that when the whole protocol launches, they've got this sort of huge overhang of profit, and it's sort of so we just didn't want that, basically, and we knew that we didn't need that. So we knew we could be self-funding, but what it meant was that we didn't have very many people. We had a core team of about sort of 4 to 6. Now we have raised some funding because of the fact that the TIG has really captured a lot of people's imaginations. It really seems to be sort of taking off, and we have a lot more resources available now to implement these various upgrades and so on. So we can just sort of get going with it. But yeah, it takes a little while to hire the right people and find the right people, which we are doing very well with at the moment, because a lot of the smartest people seem to be interested and available to work on TIG.
Yeah, excellent. And off the back of that, John, this might be backtracking a little bit, but I wanted to ask, how do the improvements in the efficiency of algorithms, let's say the knapsack problem, which is even for people without an academic background, something very easy to imagine, when
Mhm.
that problem is refined uh, through TIG such that it becomes, let's say, hypothetically, the most efficient algorithm for the knapsack problem in the world, how
Mhm.
does that translate to a real world use case. And I'm not sure that we touched on it, but once we have the fastest one, which would say that's the goal of TIG, how do we go about showing that to entities that are going to make use of it and perhaps add some value to the TIG ecosystem as a consequence?
Yeah, this is a great question. So getting the awareness that we have this IP again is something that we have resources to do now. So you need to sort of outreach to the types of people who to whom this sort of algorithmic innovation would be valuable, and give them some sort of stats as to how much is better than the current thing that they might be using. In that case, it's sort of really just kind of, industry outreach, for which it's the full-time job of kind of several people. So we are getting those people kind of recruited in as we speak. Showing somebody that an algorithm is better for a particular type of job is not too difficult. You can just sort of ask them about the types of problems that they're using, and give them some stats as to how much faster this would be on the particular type of hardware that they have available, for example. We have quite a lot of contacts in academia. The type of academics who have contacts in industry are the ones that we have focused on. Sort of Imperial College, computer science department and aeronautics department. Our colleague Phil is been in big tech. He was the on the board at Arm Holdings for 20 years, so he's quite well integrated there. But it doesn't necessarily immediately happen by itself. So the awareness has to be kind of we have to draw the attention of these companies, and especially because they don't tend to be in the crypto sphere. So unlike many of the people watching here, they're not just going to hear about the innovation game on Twitter, because the algorithm probably doesn't kind of recommend these types of projects to them. They probably think a lot of them think that the crypto doesn't have anything to do with them, so we have to make them aware that at least now it does, because it's a driver of this kind of fantastic innovation. So yeah, in that sense, it's kind of like a more traditional job of making kind of customers aware of a better product. But as I said, I'm very happy to report that we do have the resources now to to get those people to go out and do that job successfully. So yeah, this is all happening very fast, and it's happening at the moment, but it's an exciting turn of events.
Exciting indeed. And related to that, how big of an improvement in algorithmic efficiency has to occur? Like, what's the threshold that would allow us to take a step back and say, okay, there's been a huge improvement here, and now we want to go ahead and show it to people?
It's a great question. So, I mean, for me, having worked in kind of this sort of computational physics, for quite a while, and I mean, what it really depends upon mostly is the spend of the potential user on compute for a particular problem. So say they were spending, I don't know, $100 a month or something doing a particular type of calculation, for their product. If you had a sort of 2x advantage, it became twice as fast. That it probably wouldn't really be anything, that they would feel they had to immediately kind of get off their seat and sort of, and implement immediately, because sort of $50 a month is not sort of, transformational for most companies, certainly not big companies. But for if somebody was spending, kind of $10,000 a day or so on compute, and they could, suddenly save $5,000, and even for the biggest company, they would do that, because they would be sort of remiss if they did not make that saving. So a lot of you guys probably know, sort of, some of the biggest sort of compute runs at the moment are sort of running things to do with AI, but you also have a lot to do with kind of bioinformatics. Kind of many things which involve sort of SAT solvers, for example, which is checking the integrity of different kind of microchips. In problems like that, it's sort of almost like the longer you can afford to run it, the more secure that you are, and of course that's a function of the cost of the implementation of the algorithm. So yeah, basically it's hard to answer, but it's about the cost. But the sort of good thing is that, huge amounts of money are spent on compute every day in all sorts of things. It's not just AI. It's often the biggest cost of a lot of startups, in fact. Um, the kind of modern age is sort of, compute, and especially sort of AI startups. So yeah, that's the thing. It could be as small as a sort of 30% improvement. But I think, like, in almost all cases, if you had, say, a 10x improvement, which is by no means unusual, if somebody makes a sort of algorithmic breakthrough, that's pretty much indispensable for a lot of applications. Just because, even if it's, not to do with cost, it's just that you can finish your calculation sooner, and you can deliver the product or the answer that you're looking for to your scientists or customers much more quickly. But obviously there's quite a wide band in between that.
Right. You mentioned AI startups, and it reminds me of something that we've brought up. I think I've brought it up during a few community calls at this point. In his paper, Situational Awareness, going over like the state and trajectory of the artificial intelligence industry, Aschenbrenner states that initially, when people started thinking about compute clusters that they were going to build, they said, okay, we need a $10 billion compute cluster. And then every 6 months, another zero got tacked on to the cost
Mm.
of the amount of computing power and GPU farms that you would need to build in order to accommodate what people are thinking of doing. But what no one
Mm.
talks about is, as you mentioned, if you improve the efficiency of the algorithm and you get the cost down, wouldn't you
Mm.
just need less compute resources overall if there's a significant enough
Mm.
improvement in the
Yeah.
algorithm itself?
Absolutely. So this is absolutely key, right? Because when you hear people talking about AI, they always seem to implicitly assume that the algorithm is fixed. And this is despite the fact that we had a huge algorithmic leap in 2017 with the transformer architecture, which increased sort of efficiency of compute by maybe, 20x roughly. And this was like a very significant thing. But even though in the world of algorithms, that's not a particularly large leap. So you would be forgiven for wondering, like, why are they always talking as if the everything else is a given, and the only things that can change is the amount of data that you have, and the amount of compute that you have. And the reason for that is that increasing the amount of data, at least to a certain extent, and increasing the amount of compute is like you can always do it. It's just a deterministic function of how much money you've got. But even if you happen to have, someone gives you an extra $10 billion in your credit line, you can't just say, okay, let's increase the efficiency of the algorithm by 3 times. Let's increase the efficiency of the algorithm by 10 times. That cannot be bought. Money can't buy that because it's reliant on human insight. And so what investors like is they like to be said, okay, if I did give you $100 billion, what would you do with it? What would my return be? And they go to them and they say, look, this is how the algorithms work. They're parallelizable. We buy this many more GPUs, we host them here, and we get this much of a result, and it should be worth this much profit. And they're like, okay, so we'll get their money back plus a certain percentage. This seems like a reasonable investment. I'll go for it. But they can't go to these people and say, give me your billions of dollars. I'll stick it into algorithmic research and I'll get a 10x improvement. And like, we won't even have to buy any more GPUs, because these things are in scarce supply, and Nvidia are selling them at like a huge markup because they have a kind of, at least a temporary monopoly on the fastest GPUs, on the most efficient ones. So it's really about the predictability of the output given the input. It's not about, people think about it because they always talk about this. It must be the most important thing. It's not. The algorithms are much more important. They're much more powerful, hugely more powerful, like orders of magnitude in percentage. It's just that you can't get a reliable result for a fixed amount of money. And so they don't talk about it because this is all about investment, and people won't invest in things which they can't, they don't have the risk appetite. Only governments effectively have the risk appetite, typically, historically, for algorithmic research, because you can put in almost an unlimited amount of money, you just get nothing out. Because how are you supposed to solve a problem that hasn't been solved? You don't know when it will be solved. You can't say, "I'll work in it for 10 years and then I'll solve the problem." How do you know? It's just like you're staring into a black hole until one day you have a good idea. And they love data, and they love hardware in business because you can get a predictable result. It's very expensive, but at least you can make the calculation. So that's the kind of little known reason for the fixation on hardware and data within AI.
So here's a fun one. We've just mentioned, you did, the transformer architecture. That's something that we've talked about many, many times now. Particularly relevant because it's easy for people to see just by looking around them and looking at the news the degree of innovation and economic value that has been unleashed as a consequence of that. And like you said, it's
Mhm.
really only a 20x improvement in computational efficiency, which is
Mhm.
really not that large when it comes to algorithmic innovation. But that
That's
is
correct.
something that people literally cannot get away from. I think it was in 2017 that that breakthrough was published, correct?
Yes.
So, fun to think about. Is that something that could have conceivably come out of TIG? Could we have put whatever line of inquiry led to that discovery into TIG and come up with a transformer architecture on ourselves, on our own? Is that something that could have happened, or that could hypothetically happen in the future, or really just problems of this
Absolutely, it
magnitude?
is. Yep, that's a great question. So even better. So I mean, TIG can handle, and this is something we can talk about in the future. It can handle all types of problems. In fact, they don't necessarily have to be asymmetric, hard to solve, but easy to verify. Actually, the reason is because all problems can be transformed into that form. Some problems, and this is the ones that we're interested in the more near term, sort of naturally have that structure. They're hard to solve, needs to verify. Finding more efficient neural network architectures is one example of the problem that has that natural structure. And we are planning to put that into TIG. The one that we're working on right now, and we might do first, is a sort of closely related challenge to that, which is really the way to find a minimum of a multi-dimensional function, sort of non-convex function, and that's usually achieved by something called gradient descent or stochastic gradient descent in the case of AI. So we're probably going to put that one in first because it's a little bit easier to formulate. But the neural network architecture problem can be formulated and put into TIG. Things like back propagation can be done, and these are all high priorities because, of course, they are known to be sort of valuable, very valuable problems, and they're just the sort of thing that we want to have in the innovation game. So yeah, the answer is absolutely, and it is a high priority for us.
Great, that's very exciting. Now, when it comes to problems of this scale that could potentially, if improved upon and understood better, unleash innovation and economic value to the degree that the transformer architecture has. Is there any problem that you can think of right now that we could put into TIG that could potentially be a leap forward for us on the same scale? Not necessarily within the realm of AI, but just generally anything.
Yeah, I mean, there were a huge number of problems in terms of saying that, this problem is going to be, precipitate the next kind of, leap forward, this sort of fourth industrial revolution or whatever industrial revolution we're on now. That's a sort of very intrinsically difficult question to answer. It's interesting about the transformer architecture itself. When it was published in 2017, it was largely ignored. It wasn't really seen as this sensational result. It was by a few people in the know, such as Ilya Sutskever, but in general, it was not. There was not that much attention paid to it. And one of the reasons why all of the authors of the Transformer paper, kind of attention is all you need, ended up leaving Google, is because they didn't think they were doing enough to actually develop their invention and use it internally. So an interesting thing is that a lot of great breakthroughs, if you look through historically, weren't recognized as such at the time when they were published. In fact, the reason is quite easy to understand because they're often paradigm shifting things and they don't really fit into any of the boxes or categories, almost by definition, which people feel are important at that time. They're sort of, invented by these visionary people who've really realised that a certain thing is important when other people don't think that it is. Um, but it is certainly the case that we can put in a lot of types of challenges which are known to be, if not economically kind of sensational, then extremely sort of important challenges in the sort of fields of research of the people who are in the know. And these are almost always the things that turn out to be, in the end, like this kind of economic plutonium when they finally kind of crack it. And often the people who are working on it, they're not doing it for the money, but it's very kind of unpredictable as to which things cause these sort of paradigm shifting effects. And the strategy we have that for that in TIG is we really just put everything in. I mean, we're going to be putting in all of the great problems of the mathematical sciences and mathematics. Where there's no sort of bound to the number of challenges that can be in TIG. My personal feeling is that roughly of the order of around 1,000 challenges will probably cover, most of the space, but it could end up being more. And because we are a sort of, a global distributed, ultimately soon to be decentralized protocol, we're not sort of capped like a company. Like a company can't work on, one company can't work on like space travel like SpaceX plus, gene cluster sequencing like, Pfizer or something, plus AI. You just can't have all of these interests under one roof. It generally is it becomes sort of unwieldy, and they can't, there's problems sort of with kind of communication, with funding, with organization. We don't have that problem because everything is crowdsourced, right? Um, and so, what I would basically say is that, yeah, no, I can't predict the future with regard to that, but nobody can. And the best strategy for doing that is the same strategy that the sort of, science superpowers follow, like America and the UK to some extent. You just do everything which believes to be important, and the, kind of the sort of, really economically important things emerge out of that almost inevitably.
Sorry, John. I might have missed this if you stipulated, but did you mean that there would be 1,000 challenges over time, or that we would be doing 1,000 challenges concurrently?
Oh, 1,000 challenges all concurrently. Yeah, all running at the same time.
Oh my God.
I mean, the
Okay.
limiting thing for this, yeah. So the limiting thing for this really is the value of the token. So if you put too many challenges in for a given sort of token value, so, if you put, I don't know, 300 challenges in right now, the individual reward for each one will be a bit low. So you basically grow as the network grows, but there is no ultimate limit, other than the sort of market capitalization of the network. And the thing is, the market capitalization of the network sort of, encompasses all computational science, which, of course, as a field is, it's very hard to even estimate how valuable that would be going forward. I mean, it's vast. So I don't really see us in the long term being limited by that, but we are limited by the rate of growth of the value of the network. And that's why we have to do things sort of gradually. So they'll start off slowly, and it will accelerate a lot over the next, I would say 2 to 3 years.
Great. And you mentioned that there's a lot of these challenges. Now, when it comes to uh, assessing the value of a challenge, uh, is there any methodology that we're employing to ensure that the highest value challenges are prioritized and put into the game, or how are we going about this?
Yeah, so ultimately the challenges are going to be sort of proposed by a committee of kind of domain experts, but they'll be working to sort of guide a sort of constitution as to what you need to sort of, kind of things that you should look for. The one sort of one kind of priority is really diversity. So diversity is not just because, we want to be involved in all these different interesting areas. And in fact, the more diverse the challenges are, more kind of, uncorrelated potentially in terms of their solution methods in TIG, the more secure TIG is. And this is part of the kind of core mechanism of optimizable proof of work, which is, wasn't previously considered possible. But it means that if you make some big algorithmic breakthrough potentially in sort of one challenge or two challenges, it doesn't necessarily correspond to a big breakthrough in the other challenges because they're very different types of problems essentially. So the more that is the case, the more secure optimizable proof of work is, and that's one of the reasons why we're going to pick challenges from just very diverse areas. In the end, we're going to have just, pretty much all of them in there. So by definition, it will be diverse. But as it's grown, we're not going to, just pick loads and loads from AI or loads and loads from physics. We're going to spread it around: biology, chemistry, mathematics, and so on. In terms of the sort of value, what we're really focused on, I mean, there's of course a natural incentive to pick challenges which are, from applied areas for which people are, there's a lot of industrial activity going on, like AI, so they're perceived as being sort of valuable in a monetary sense. Um, we really want to pick challenges which are sort of valuable in the more kind of, slightly more ephemeral sense, in the sense that they are seen to be, kind of keys to unlocking understanding of, natural processes and sort of fundamental processes in nature. More than valuable, I would say, important, quote unquote. So there should certainly be a certain fraction of the challenges which is reserved for those types of problems in the more kind of fundamental areas. You might think, oh, why are you going to do that rather than the sort of monetarily valuable, the sort of commercializable ones? Well, the reason is because the fundamental work spills over into the commercializable stuff. So if you and this is the reason why large governments fund fundamental science, in fact, because they don't do it just because they love science. The reason why America is the biggest superpower is largely because they fund a lot of fundamental science, which doesn't necessarily even have any kind of application or way to monetize it in the near term. But it's just known historically that people find applications for this sort of thing. As soon as you understand a natural process better, people start thinking of different products and processes that you can build on top of that. So it's if you have enough diversity, then you can reliably capture these kinds of unexpected spillovers, these sorts of applications that were previously unexpected, and that's the reason why it's important to have kind of fundamental type challenges in, as well as the more applied ones. So these are just very kind of like high level rules of thumb for how the people will be sort of guided in terms of the challenges that they will propose. But yeah, ultimately you have to have considerable number of currently monetizable ones in there as well. But you also have sort of more fundamental ones because those sort of lay the groundwork for future discoveries. If you don't have them, then the applied stuff will tend to sort of dry up over time. Um, yeah, I think that's the best answer I can give at the moment.
Yeah, thank you. And it's certainly the breadth of this approach, the amount of problems in different domains that can be accommodated that has me so excited about TIG. Because whenever I tell people about a Web3 project that I'm looking at, sometimes it's very difficult to explain to a layperson what kind of impact this is going to have on their life. But when talking about TIG to people who are just finding out about it, it's actually more difficult to explain what it couldn't conceivably affect. So certainly the scope of what can be done here is absolutely enormous. Very quickly, we do have the list of attendees. I have, as we do every time, put them into a prize wheel. So I'm going to go ahead and take a pause from the questions here in order to go ahead and select the winners. So, who will be the lucky winner? We're going to do, I think we've done 3 every week the past few times. So let's stick with that. I'm going to go ahead and spin. Oh, look at that. Cool. So while John was answering the last question, I did do 1 spin prematurely. The first winner is Mass Dog. Congratulations. Or Moss Dog? I'm wearing my glasses.
Moss Dog.
Yes, that is Moss Dog. Okay, cool. The second one that I just spin for is good old Skinned. Skinned, congratulations. You are our second winner. Always good to see you, my man. And we'll do the third. Just a second. Okay, I'm not sure how to pronounce this. Nathu? I'm almost certainly butchering this. Either way, we have your name and you will be contacted. All right, Mossdog, Skinned, and Nathu, congratulations. You are this week's winners. If you're paying attention, please go ahead and DM me with your base scan address, and we'll go ahead and get that sorted sometime within the next week. Okay, back to the original line of inquiry. So, in order to get an idea of the potential scope of TIG, one of the things that I went and looked at, and this wasn't exhaustive research or anything, so please do not cite me in any conversations or any writing that you guys might do on Twitter, but I tried to find out what the total economic value of algorithms as an asset class is. And the number that I kept arriving at was somewhere in the ballpark of $10 trillion, which is, frankly, an absurd amount of money. Now, I wanted to ask you, John, prior to TIG, um, how has the value of algorithms as an asset class been assessed? Furthermore, has it ever been a directly investable asset class? And then, once we've
Mhm.
established those two, how does TIG change the way in which algorithms are valued? And how does it um, change the way that people look at investing into algorithms? A lot there. I can
Yeah,
repeat as
it's a
necessary.
great question. Yeah, so the power of algorithms has been recognized. You look in the academic literature, there's sort of comparisons about how quickly, compute has effectively sped up due to hardware getting more efficient and faster compared to how quickly sort of computations have sped up because people have discovered more effective algorithms. And the conclusion is always the same: the algorithms are more powerful than the hardware speed ups. And this is quite a result because many people have heard about sort of Moore's law, where it's certainly held to a very good approximation for 40 or 50 years, where the speed of microchips was doubling about every 18 months. So this it gets a lot of press, and one of the reasons is because it's predictably investable and privately investable because of the sort of predictable, as it turned out, kind of relatively regular sort of leaps forward. If you put in a certain amount of private investment to microchips, you could sort of shrink the transistor size quite predictably. Um, Algorithmic research, on the other hand, was typically funded by government because it was considered too risky and too unpredictable for private investment. And so the government sort of steps in, with these things which are very important and wouldn't happen without government funding, through sort of grants and, really kind of academic university funding. That's where sort of most of it occurred. And of course, the reason why they do it and they put in sort of, tens of billions a year, kind of get sort of through the academic avenue is because it has seen historically, the enormous kind of impact that it made. One of the sort of downsides of doing it that way is that distributing academic funding tends to be quite inefficient because it's done on a non-market basis, and how they do it really is they'll sort of ask a committee of people who should get the funding. And predictably, what they often say is like, either I should get it or my friend should get it. This is just kind of human nature. This is just natural. And if you don't do it and everybody else is doing it, then you sort of fall behind. So it's a bit of kind of tragedy of the commons. But despite this sort of, very kind of unfortunate, and this is very kind of known to be a sort of inefficient, distribution of resources. It's a bit like, how resources were distributed in the Soviet Union. You just sort of ask committees of people. Despite the sort of, very kind of well-known and acknowledged drawbacks of that, there's been huge impact from, investment in academic science. Um, the kind of the extent to which you could get even more out of the system if you could find a market determined way of allocating these resources, I think is a sort of, is this kind of a long debated issue. I mean, everybody agrees it would just be huge, and what they disagree on is precisely how huge it would be. And this is, the reason why kind of academic science and, algorithms are still invested in. But we are really, I think, looking at a bit of a change in the way that this is done. And one of the reasons is due to AI-driven algorithmic, sort of automated algorithm development. So pretty soon you'll be able to kind of run machines to find better algorithms, and maybe some scientists will be able to tweak them and make them even better. But ultimately, the kind of better algorithms be able to found by a sort of compute intensive automated process. And the academic kind of sort of route, for all its faults and inefficiency, always did seem to have the kind of a very clear benefit that these things, when discovered, tended to be published openly, so other people could build on the work, which sort of accelerated the pace of innovation. But probably even more importantly, these very powerful new algorithms, they weren't sort of locked up as trade secrets, in one company. And with a lot of these things, if the company's got an advantage which is this large, you couldn't compete with them. And imagine if Google had kept the transformer private, to have a 20x advantage in efficiency of neural network training of neural networks would just be completely decisive. Nobody else would be able to afford to buy 20 times more machines. It's already costing billions. which would be what you would need to be able to compete with that if you didn't have the transformer. And so the kind of the peril of this sort of automated algorithm development, although it means that it will then become privately investable because people can sort of buy these machines and invest in them, a bit like the way they invest in creating new LLMs. It will push the things closed, and that is a sort of that's more of a centralization risk than people having monopolies on data or having a kind of special relationship with Nvidia, so they get sort of the first graphic cards. Algorithms are orders of magnitude more powerful than that, and so one of the kind of central aims of the innovation game is to really line up the incentive so that it is more um, beneficial. It just makes more economic sense to submit a more powerful algorithm, a more advanced algorithm to the innovation game rather than keep it private. And that's really, kind of for all our sakes, because you don't want one company just sort of having a monopoly. It gives them too much power and it's just bad for innovation itself.
Yeah, and I remember a comment that our good friend Longval made a few weeks ago, right around the time that a few months ago rather. He was talking about how there is some theoretical price of the innovation game token where Google, or really any large tech conglomerate for that matter, would be incentivized to upload their proprietary algorithms that they would otherwise keep behind closed doors so that they have a competitive
Mhm.
advantage. Anyway,
Mhm.
there is that theoretical price where they would say, well, actually, it's not worth it to go ahead and keep this secret. We're going to upload it to the innovation game. Is that something that you, when TIG reaches escape velocity, see happening in the future?
Absolutely. Well, this is an interesting thing because I think kind of logically for a lot of people they would think, okay, academics, I can see why they would send things to the innovation game. Academics typically don't publish, don't patent kind of results. There's really some interesting reasons. One thing, patents slow them down, and they often with these big discoveries, that there's the few teams working on it at the same time, and if you're not the first to publish, you're just a kind of footnote in history, really. So this kind of priority of discovery is the most important thing for them because you have to generally patent before you disclose something. They don't want to file a patent because it will slow them down and they might not be the first person to publish it. So there's all sorts of interesting reasons, why academics don't sort of file patents and secure property rights. They just want their work to be used, so they have a higher impact, and then they get more grants if they have more citations, and they get promoted to be a professor, and they're happy. But with corporates, of course, they want to secure property rights, typically, and sort of make money out of their creations. And yet, historically, well, at least kind of in more recent years, sort of big companies, who I don't think anybody doubts, operate on any basis except for to maximize profit, are some of the biggest contributors to open source projects. And in open source projects, you're really giving your contributions, to a code base whereby it's then free for anybody to use forever. If you have a sort of patent on a contribution that you make to an open source project, you have to give the project a license to that patent. Um, and this is something that big corporates, find, almost counterintuitively something very very appealing, for several reasons. I mean, one is that you'll get something interesting and good, but if you contribute to an open source project, often then other people come and make it even better, and then obviously you have the right to use that as well. So it can sort of make your internal processes more efficient. It's almost like you can get other people to contribute sort of work and sort of move your invention on even further. Another thing is that these big companies really want to be seen to be, kind of friendly to open source because a lot of the best sort of coders and engineers in the world are very kind of committed to open source. So it just sort of looks good. They want to appear, kind of generous and supportive to that community. Um, and this is one of the main reasons behind Meta's, seemingly irrational kind of spending billions of dollars training Llama 3 and then just giving it away for free. Anybody can run it. They don't have to pay Meta to do that. But they're getting a lot of kudos among open source people, and that means that the best engineers often want to come and work for them rather than the competitors. And they know that that's a huge advantage, because they can afford to do it. They feel that it's worth it. So we certainly aspire in the innovation game to cultivate a similar culture. Um, and we and one of the things it means that we can do that is that any revenue which is captured from these commercial licensing fees, for example, is just routed straight back into more innovation and more benchmarking. So we don't take a cut, we don't skim any off. We really just kind of route it all back. It's sort of a closed system. And so on top of all of those sort of open source, kind of benefits, which I just mentioned, the contributors also get remunerated monetarily in the innovation game. They do not get that in open source, but if you give a good algorithm or a better contribution to the innovation game, you get those innovator rewards as well. Potentially for a very long time if they're sort of the enhanced rewards which come with algorithmic breakthroughs, plus all the benefits of open source, because everything is available under an open license forever. So yeah, it's not certainly not as counterintuitive as it might initially seem, to think that the kind of large tech companies will contribute to TIG.
Excellent. So certainly a number of different things that would motivate them there beyond just simple economic value that they could accumulate as a consequence of interacting with TIG. All right,
Exactly. It's yeah,
John,
precisely because they do it for zero remuneration, monetary remuneration already because of the different types of value they get back. And so TIG has all of that plus monetary remuneration as well.
yes, John, we will inevitably continue talking about this. I just want to keep the recording at a reasonable length. We are at 55 minutes now, and it's definitely going to be even longer than that because I actually did not record the intro, so that's fine. I will go ahead and record the intro separately and just edit it such that it's before the start of our conversation, the recording. But stopping you right now because we do have some quick questions from the community that I want to get out of the way, and I want to make sure that they're addressed because it would not be the community call without calls or without questions from the community. So very quick,
Indeed.
from Lord of Sherdan. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. Really nice guy. I talk to this guy all the time. He says, "Hello, admin. I love and support your project, your work, and you. I also wish you success in your endeavors. I have a question." He apologizes for not being able to turn on his microphone. That's all right. You can go ahead and type your questions anytime. He's asking, what security measures does your project have in place, and how do you protect against hacks or attacks? Very broad, but anything that comes to mind, John?
Yeah, it's a great question. So at the moment, TIG is sort of semi-centralized. So we use AWS server to check the proof of work. I think I understand that it is checkable by anybody, but we check it centrally, and the wards are allocated sort of on that basis. So there's a lot of sort of anti DOS kind of protection and stuff, which comes you can get it from um, AWS. It's sort of like a kind of paid service. In terms of like other kind of checks that we've done, I mean, we had a kind of security code review before we went live. It did miss some things. One thing that it missed was this recent sort of attack, which was based on finding kind of being able to submit the same solution multiple times because they found separate nonces which corresponded to the same solution. So that was unfortunately something which the code review missed. Um, we will be doing a more kind of comprehensive code review now that we have the resources to do it. So one of the reasons, yeah, before, as I said, we're kind of entirely self-funded. We did pay for a code review, but it was not the sort of deepest and most forensic one which you can pay for, because you can have an almost unlimited amount of kind of code reviews, and sort of kind of pay for sort of higher and higher levels of depth, which we are in the process of doing. Yeah, but so far we have managed to keep it together. So it really is that sort of code audits. At least while we're using a server, kind of sort of standard DOS sort of protection. And when we move on to our L1, again, it'll be just all standard things, code audits, um, and a bug bounty program as well. Another thing that we are introducing imminently. So that's another thing which we should have already had, but we are going to have it very soon.
Yeah, I mean, every day I'm seeing more and more people ask for it, so I'm glad that it's coming up, and it'll certainly be a boon for the community as well as the different programmers and analysts that want to get involved, searching for bugs and
Yes.
helping to squash them. One more question, final one from Lord of Shaddan. I'm not sure that I understand it properly, but we'll see if we can go ahead and figure it out. What plans do you have for solutions and algorithms? The current algorithms seem very dysfunctional. I'm in contact with other miners, and they're in the same situation. I think maybe he's referring to the number of solutions that are produced and the rewards that are accumulated as a consequence of them. Uh, you can go ahead and see how you interpret it, John. And then, of course, if John doesn't answer
Yeah,
the question, you can go ahead and clarify.
there is one sense in which many algorithms are indeed dysfunctional. We don't people send in algorithms as innovators. We don't we check for the code is not sort of malicious. Kind of do various checks of that sort. What we don't check for is that the algorithm fundamentally makes sense. I mean, we don't want to be the kind of arbiter and kind of the judge of that. We sort of trust that the benchmarkers, if an algorithm is giving out kind of nonsense results or is sort of unreliable or buggy, they simply just won't use it, and then the innovator of that algorithm won't get any innovator rewards. That's one reason why an algorithm might be dysfunctional. Another reason is that an algorithm which seems to perform very well for a certain amount of time, when the mining difficulty goes up, it may be that the algorithm isn't in fact dysfunctional. It just looks to be producing less solutions because suddenly there's more competition in terms of the benchmarking, and the mining difficulty has been sort of surging. I think really since the very beginning, there seems to be kind of very kind of large increases, sort of step changes in the amount of compute being directed towards the network. So that in that case, it might look dysfunctional when it's not. Another thing that could be happening is that when the difficulty goes up significantly, some algorithms perform better at higher difficulties and some algorithms perform better at lower difficulties. So this is a bit of a complexity. It's not necessarily the same algorithm which will be the most performant at all difficulty levels. So this is something that's a little bit kind of tricky. This is one of the reasons why mining in the innovation game requires a bit more skill and subtlety than I think that most proof of work protocols, because it may in fact be that an algorithm which is there already, which you haven't been using, might sort of become the best choice as the difficulty goes up. This is a possibility. Other than that, I can't think of why algorithms. There's three reasons why they might either be dysfunctional or appear dysfunctional, but there may well be other reasons too. It's a bit of a kind of a complex landscape, I would say.
Thank you, John. And I unfortunately was lying when I said that would be the last question. Normally, like, I would table it and say save your questions for next time or go ahead and post them somewhere in the server. But I don't want to ignore Jimster. Jimster's put a lot of work into contributing to the community in the past few weeks. He's been very, very helpful, especially when it came to helping us squash some bugs slash exploits. So here we go. I'm glad I made the call this week. Very interesting overall. There is so much application for TIG over time, especially in the world of compression and distribution algorithms. I have a question. Will challenges ever, quote unquote, complete in the sense that they wouldn't be required anymore? As new challenges come on, will everyone be required to test all of the challenges, even if there are 10 plus different challenges? Or would challenges become quote unquote retired over time, where they aren't necessarily removed, but they aren't required for all benchmarkers?
So this is a really good question. So it certainly is possible for challenges to be retired, both sort of practically. There will be a mechanism for that, and also there are some reasons certainly why a challenge could be retired. What the most sort of obvious and decisive one is that some challenges, in fact, have known theoretical bounds for how fast the things can ever be. And if you find a sort of an algorithm or an implementation of algorithm which sort of seems to reach that theoretical bound, then it would be known that there wouldn't be any more further improvement to make. The thing is about that is that challenges with known theoretical bound, most of them, I mean, the bounds probably exist. They're not known for a lot of challenges. And the ones that they are known for, typically we're sort of currently a long way from those particular bounds. So that kind of very sort of mathematical and sort of hard to argue with reason would crop up relatively infrequently. In terms of sort of just kind of retiring a challenge, maybe because there hasn't been very much progress made in it for quite a long time. That's a bit more of a nuanced one. So it's a sort of if there's no advances made in a particular area, in some sense, the kind of the bounty or the sort of incentive to sort of focus on that challenge tends to increase over time. And one kind of analogy I like to use is, let's say, like trying to make a race car faster, like Formula One. Like there are many ways that you can do it. You can think of a better sort of mix of fuel. You can sort of focus on the kind of aerodynamics to get more downforce. You could focus on, I don't know, give it sort of traction control or, some special type of braking or, there is a huge number of sort of aspects and different kind of areas that you can focus on. And often in these cases, everybody's sort of obsessed with aerodynamics or the fuel. Nobody's really thinking about the tires for a while. And then suddenly somebody kind of makes a great leap forward, in the tires, or maybe the kind of strategy for how many times you stop in the pit stop or something like that. And it's sort of, one of the reasons for this is because if something isn't looked at for a while, you get other sort of advances in related fields, and then suddenly you look back at it again, and you realize, oh, I can make an improvement on this because like some other related thing has been moved forward. You realize that there's an application of new technique B to kind of old problem A, which you didn't previously appreciate. So I would say that the fact that there isn't sort of much action in a particular area for a prolonged period of time isn't necessarily a strong argument to sort of retire that challenge. Um, there are cases that there are implementations of the innovation game where you could think of where a challenge could kind of be sort of put to sleep for a while. Like there's not much happening there, and maybe if somebody comes up with a new technique which pertains to that challenge, it could sort of be woken up again. This sort of slightly more nuanced approach, I wouldn't rule out. I don't know a kind of systematic way of doing that currently. There are various kind of downsides. Like if people could potentially develop specialized hardware for particular types of challenges, for example. And obviously, if you put that kind of challenge to sleep, the incentive to develop that hardware will go away. And then, developing a better piece of hardware can often be the inspiration for developing another, type of algorithm, maybe which is sort of optimized to run on that new type of hardware and so on. So it's like when you take away the sort of market demand, which is supplied by the proof of work benchmarkers, it does very much kind of remove any incentive to kind of innovate in other ways, which might not necessarily be algorithmic, but may later on inspire algorithmic progress further down the line. So this is a bit of a kind of non-committal answer. It's something that that has come up before, which I've thought a bit about. I'd definitely be happy to hear any of Jim's suggestions for kind of tweaks or optimizations, a way that things, the kind of proof of work in TIG can be focused on the challenges where there's more action or more kind of progress. And I certainly wouldn't rule it out. But at the moment, what we're doing is the simplest implementation of TIG. There could be sort of more elaborate tweaks to be made, but at the present time, I'm unconvinced that they would actually give more benefits than they would take away. But yeah, I remain open-minded.
Yeah, thank you, John. Excellent answer. Very comprehensive. Alrighty, gentlemen. We are at the 2:15 mark. This call's been going on for quite some time. It's going to take me a bit to edit it and get it up, but of course, I will go ahead and ping everyone when that does happen. But yeah, really blown away by the turnout this week. We have, I don't even know how many, but definitely over 50 people in attendance. Very impressive. Glad you guys could all make it out. We love doing these, and they happen every 2 weeks. So look forward to the next one. You can, of course, scroll to the top of the channel list, and if you look at the events tab, you can see all the events we have coming up. There are the regular ones, of course, like the community calls and Ying's Dev Hour, but you might want to check it every so often just to see if we have anything special going on. But yes, thank you everyone for coming out. It's been wonderful talking to you guys in the chat, so it's always great to hop on here and get to do it in person. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, John.
Thanks a lot, guys.
Bye.
Bye. See you next time.